And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Deeper Dive. It is Tuesday, January 7th. I am Josh Engleman. I'm joined by DK. We're brought to you by us. Sign up at Stokastic using the link in the description. Get a month for free of whichever sport you choose. Projections, ownership, sims, Discord, all of it. And all you have to do is sign up through one of our partners. Pretty good deals. So make sure you click that link. We'll talk about it again in the future. But first, 7-game slate ahead of us. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live, and follow us both on Twitter. This isn't the worst slate in the world. It's not the best, but we do get a good Boston versus Denver game today. What's going on, DK? How are you?
Yeah, doing pretty good. I think it's a solid 7-game slate. I like the schedule all week for NBA DFS. Yesterday, I don't know if you played, but it was pretty crazy. A lot of chaos, a lot of late breaking news. So kind of hoping we'll get some chaos today. We still have a lot of Q tags that we'll talk about. But yeah, I think it's shaping up to be a pretty solid slate.
There are a lot of spots that are going to be fun to talk about. Some are pretty gross to talk about. I'm kind of excited to break it all down. Value is in weird spots. We don't have a ton of it, which is leaving someone like Nikola Jokic a little bit less owned than you would expect, or maybe not expect, but it does create a very interesting dynamic trying to get to a 12-5 Jokic, at least as of right now. We'll see what that looks like by the time we get to lock. I'm excited to talk about it. I wish we had a better first game to talk about, but unfortunately we don't. It's not very good. It's Phoenix. It's Charlotte. The Suns are 4.5-point favorites in Charlotte, 222 total. I thought Phoenix might have an interesting injury report today. They don't. It's just no Royce O'Neal again, same as yesterday. So they're playing the back-to-back, and it doesn't matter. And nobody's owned here. 2% ownership to Devin Booker, 2% ownership to Kevin Durant. Those are the only guys that don't have a 0 next to their name for ownership on DraftKings. And for FanDuel people, 8% to Booker, 5% to Durant. That is essentially the same scenario. Do you see yourself getting to Phoenix or at all here with their new look starting lineup?
No, I think it's really hard to get to this team right now. Like you said, just Royce O'Neal out, but that really doesn't do a ton. The new starting lineup last game was they moved Mason Plumlee in the starting lineup for Nurkic, and then Brad Beal also moved to the bench. But yeah, with that center rotation, you actually saw basically 3 guys split it. Plumlee started, he played the first quarter and the third quarter. Nurk came in for a bit, and then Oso was the last guy in, and he actually closed the game. So I think it's really hard to get to any of the centers right now for Phoenix. Beal moving to the bench, actually had his best game in a while. He played 30 minutes. Price point, though, doesn't really stand out, 7.1K, right? If he was a bit cheaper, I think it'd be more interesting, but he's kind of priced up from when the Suns were a bit more shorthanded. The minutes on Tyus Jones have kind of been weird. Monte Morris has been playing more than expected. So that is a bit concerning for Tyus Jones. Now, if you told me that Tyus Jones was for sure going to play like his normal minutes, which was probably around 30, I would have some interest. But again, they've been giving Morris a bit more run than expected. Don't think I can get to Ryan Dunn either. He's just a super low usage player. So yeah, I would say for the 7-game slate, this is definitely my least favorite team to target.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. When I ran my Sims, I had Booker 8% optimal, Durant 8% optimal. That's whatever. I got to 7% of Durant. I guess that's a stand at 2% ownership, but at least the only 2 guys that I got, a single share of Devin Booker and 7% of Kevin Durant. If I'm going to be getting anything from Phoenix, I guess I'm happy that it's those 2 dudes, but I think I'd prefer to not have them at all and not lock in those spots because we're going to have plenty of late swap opportunities before the 7:30 game, the 8 o'clock game, the 9 o'clock game, the 10 o'clock game. So there's going to be a lot of movement if we need it. We'll see what Phoenix ends up looking like. By the way, a big pace down spot in this game. I actually have this game with the lowest pace of any game on the slate, 0.2 of a possession behind Miami and Golden State. The 222 total is like middle of the pack for what we're getting today. Oh, Arsenal lost to Newcastle. Ha, suck it, Arsenal. Anyway, let's talk about Charlotte, which is kind of the exact same story. Seth Curry's probable for those that care. Diabate is with the G League team. Trey Mann still out. 9% ownership coming into LaMelo Ball. 5% ownership coming into Mark Williams. and basically zero to everybody else on the Hornets. Stop me if you've heard that story before, but we just said that exact same thing for Phoenix. Do you want LaMelo Ball? Do you want Mark Williams? Do you want anything else?
Yeah, I actually do have some interest in this Hornets team. I think they're slightly more interesting than the Phoenix Suns. So LaMelo, I think, is going a little bit underowned right now. On the season, he's a 1.5 fantasy point per minute player. In his first game back, he played 33 minutes. I think those minutes definitely could tick up a bit in a competitive game. So I think at the current ownership, I like LaMelo a good amount as a contrarian spend up. Mark Williams also, I think, is going a little bit underowned. 6K. The minutes have been hovering in the high 20s recently, which is solid for Mark Williams, who is a 1.38 fantasy point per minute player. So those are the two that are getting just a little bit ownership. Honestly, I think that both are going a little bit underowned. So I like both LaMelo and Mark Williams in tournaments. The rest of this team is getting absolutely no ownership, and I agree with it. Like, you have Miles Bridges priced up from when LaMelo and Brandon Miller were out. Well, now they are back. Brandon Miller himself is too expensive at 8.6K. These fringe guys, I just can't mess with it. Like, they ran a 12-man rotation last game in a competitive game. So it's really just LaMelo and Mark Williams, and I think both are going a bit underowned right now.
Yeah, I'm dead neutral to the field on LaMelo. I have a couple shares of Mark Williams. I got one random Miles Bridges share, which like I don't love, but at least he's like a real guy that's on this team. It's not a share of Josh Green or something. I didn't like that last rotation. I don't see any scenario where you could go to Brandon Miller on DraftKings. He's 7,200 on FanDuel, way more playable there. 8,600 for him on DK is a pretty tough sell when LaMelo's around. So for me, it's probably just LaMelo, Mark Williams, and that's going to be about it. I
Mhm.
do like the idea of getting to those guys. Like the ceiling on LaMelo is massive every night. I mean, he gets up so many shots. Is he leading the league in usage still? I assume
I would
so.
assume he's right up there.
Let me double check it. Yeah, 37.6% usage so far on dunks and threes. That's a full percentage point, 1.5 percentage points ahead of Joel Embiid, and about 2 percentage points ahead of Giannis. Only other guy that's up that Shea is at 33. So we're talking about like 5% higher than Shea. LaMelo's going to get those shots up, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, game one, I'm not mad about it being pretty uneventful. It does set us up a little bit better for some late swaps. This one's a little bit more eventful, and it could get really crazy depending on how the injury news breaks. Houston Rockets, 13-point favorites in Washington, 224 total. Now, Houston's got a doubtful tag on Tari Eason. That shouldn't be surprising. Jalen Green is questionable. That one's big. Jabari Smith already out. Reed Shepard with the G League team. And this is leading us to 45% of Amin Thompson, around 20% of Jalen Green. Nobody else in double digits, though. Fred Van Vliet at 5, which I think is comically low, and I have quite a bit more. Dylan Brooks at 4, which I think is a little low. Şengün at 8, which is about right to me. And then you could roll the dice on someone like Cam Whitmore, potentially Jayshawn Tate. These guys could look a lot different if Jalen Green ends up out. But let's start with the main attraction for Houston. 47% ownership to Amin Thompson on DraftKings, 51 on FanDuel. I have absolutely no problem getting to him at 6,600.
Yep, total agreement there. I think he's one of the best point per dollar plays right now on the slate. He's getting the ownership, and he should be. He's got nice eligibility. In spots like this, when you're missing a starter, the minutes are always very secure. Now you're missing both Jabari and Tari Eason, and possibly Jalen Green too. So played 41 minutes last time out. I don't think you can expect that, but mid 30s minutes I think is probably a fair guess for Amin Thompson in a great spot. So yeah, I think he looks like a really, really good option. Jalen Green's the other guy getting some ownership. Right now he's currently questionable, 6.3K. If he does play, I like the upside in him quite a bit. I do find it interesting, though, that really none of the other main Rockets are getting much ownership, like Şengün, Van Vliet, even Dylan Brooks, I think are all interesting tournament plays. I mean, it's a great matchup against Washington. If they can keep it competitive, Houston has been running a pretty tight rotation recently. So I think all those guys are going a bit under-owned. Even have some interest in Cam Whitmore. He would look better, obviously, if Jalen Green gets ruled out. But even with Jalen Green, even if he plays, I think Whitmore is viable. He's been getting a lot more shots up recently. Minutes have been ticking up with a couple guys out. So, Thompson and Green are the guys getting ownership. But honestly, I think this whole team looks pretty good. Şengün, Van Vliet, Brooks, Whitmore. Any of those top six guys, I think, are pretty good options and just like an amazing spot against the Wizards.
Yeah, if this gets out of hand the way that it probably can, like it's probably going to be a good fourth quarter for Cam Whitmore. You would
Yep.
expect him to be out there getting some shots up, so that could bail you out. Like you mentioned, some of these guys not getting a ton of ownership. I have 17% of Fred VanVleet at 5% owned. Like I love that in this
Hmm.
spot. I'm already neutral to the field on Amin Thompson. I'm neutral to the field on Jalen Green. I have no problem whatsoever getting some more Dylan Brooks. I've got 10% of Şengün. I want to get a lot of Houston because Washington blows. I mean, their offense is next level terrible. It might even be worse depending on how these Q tags shake out. Their defense is next level terrible. That's pretty beneficial for Houston, who doesn't exactly have the best offense in the world, but it's going to look great when you go up against the Wizards. There's a lot to like here on the Houston side. I I kind of want Poole, Koulibaly, and Bub Carrington to all play,
Hmm.
just so like this isn't a real disaster scenario. But if they don't, that also could find us a little bit more value, lead us to someone like Nikola Jokic a little bit easier. Let's assume, let's go through this scenario.
Okay.
If Jalen Green is out today, who do you think is starting for the Houston Rockets?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a few options. You have Aaron Holiday, you have Jay Tate, and obviously Cam Whitmore. Honestly, like they might go with a guy like Aaron Holiday just to keep Whitmore off the bench, kind of provide that scoring spark off the bench. But what do you think if Jalen Green's out?
I would guess they would go to Whitmore
Okay.
to soak up some of that usage. Because if you're taking Jalen Green off, you're taking off their main usage guy as a
Yeah.
guard, at least. You know, obviously Şengün has it too. If you take Jalen Green off, it's either going to do one of two things. They're either going to go to Whitmore and it's like a 1-to-1 swap of usage, or they're going to go to like Jayshawn Tate, and that is going to be a huge boost to Fred VanVleet, to Dylan Brooks, to Şengün to a degree. Amin Thompson's probably not going to get a ton of shots up, which he shouldn't because he can't shoot, but certainly the opportunities are better. So it's an interesting dynamic of who ends up being that starter because if it's Tate, I like the rest of the team a lot more. And obviously, then I like Tate because he's going to get enough minutes to be a great value. That goes without saying at that point. But if it's Whitmore, I don't think that it really changes anything for the rest of the starters. But then obviously, Whitmore becomes probably the best play on the slate at that point.
Yep, totally agree there. Like Whitmore would be similar usage player to Jalen Green if he gets inserted in the starting lineup. If it's a guy like Tate or like Holiday, the other starters are going to look better. So totally agree at that point. And then if Whitmore starts, I think he's probably going to be like your best value on the slate.
And I would be surprised if it's Holiday just because, like, when Fred VanVleet comes off, who's like, are they just staggering him and Holiday at that point, or do they just keep Holiday to be the outlet valve for Fred VanVleet whenever he needs to come off the floor? So that'll be an interesting balance. Like if Shepard were around, then I could actually see it being Holiday.
Mhm.
But they are kind of thin in the guard department for right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being Tate. That would be like my assumption. I
Okay.
want it to be Tate because that kind of makes me like Cam Whitmore off the bench a little bit more because I don't think we still have to fill 34 minutes here. Like he's going to get some sort of increase and still look good. And then we get some 55 or $3,500 small forward, power forward, Jayshawn Tate value. So I assume after we talk about all of this that Jalen Green will just play and none of this will matter. Do you have a lean on it? I don't. I assume he's
I
in,
don't
I
know.
guess.
Yeah, I think it's close to 50-50. I haven't seen anything one way or the other.
No, same. And it's hard to really dig into the betting lines for it, given there's 100 minutes of Q tags on the Washington side that
Right.
could move this bad boy around a little bit. I like this Houston team though. I think they're honestly undervalued. I mean, obviously, Amin Thompson's getting the love, but I think the rest of these guys are a little underrepresented for right now. Anxious to see where it ends up. Now, Wizards. So the only guy that's getting any ownership is Kyle Kuzma at 12%. Nobody else is getting any, but that's not all that surprising. Malcolm Brogdon is out. I'll say it anyway. Marvin Bagley is out. I don't know how much that could possibly matter. Johnny Davis is out. Again, don't think that matters. But Jordan Poole questionable. Bilal Coulibaly questionable. Bub Carrington questionable. I'm obviously not going to ask you if you like anything here. If they're
Hmm.
all in, I don't think anything's all that interesting other than Kuzma. But if this breaks, like, do you have your eye on anybody hypothetically? Like, who do you think stands to benefit most? Because this is essentially like your starting point guard, your starting shooting guard, and your starting small forward not being
Right.
available for this one. Who stands to benefit the most here for Washington if this breaks weird?
Honestly, I think like a guy like Jared Butler would be a really interesting play at the flat min price. Just because this team is, they already have no Brogdon, right? If like
Yep.
both Poole and Carrington get rolled out too, like they're going to need some ball handling, and Jared Butler obviously can provide that. So, with him being a, decent point per minute player, I think Jared Butler would be interesting at the flat min price. And then like guys like Corey Kispert, Keyshawn George is a lot more interesting. I think like Champagnie would have to play a little bit more. He would look a little bit better. So like there definitely could be some value here for Washington if a couple of these guys end up getting ruled out.
Yeah.
If everyone is in, I'm kind of in agreement. I don't think there's anything that really stands out for Washington. Like Kyle Kuzma has played 28 and 31 minutes for the last couple of games. I think you're probably going to expect around 30 minutes from him in a competitive game. I think I have a little bit more interest in Jonas Valanciunas in the field right now. He's only projecting for about 2% ownership on the season. He's a 1.35 fantasy point per minute player. I think you're probably going to expect like 20 to 22 minutes, which I think makes him a reasonable contrarian option. But yeah, I think like some of these value pieces like Butler, George, Kispert could be a lot more interesting if one or two of these question players end up getting rolled out.
Speaking of Jonas Valanciunas, just out of curiosity, how many minutes? Oh, Sar and Jova. How many minutes have they played alongside of each other? They've
They
played
really have not
60.
been overlapping
So they
recently.
played 62 minutes alongside of each other so far this season. I was just thinking, like, they've already got a decent chunk of guys out. If all three
Mhm.
of those dudes end up out, I wonder if that's any
That's
potential
true.
increase to Joe Val's minutes. They are minus 47 in those 62 minutes, negative 36 per 100 possessions. So maybe they don't dust that one off if everybody's out, because at least so far, it's been a giant failure. But not out of the realm of possibility that they could slide Sar to the 4 for 2 or 3 minutes and try to soak up a little bit of extra playing time, just because they're missing a bunch of dudes. But I wanted to look because if that number was oddly higher than that, I was gonna
Mhm.
think about it more. That's really bad.
Yeah, no, it's not good. But they honestly, I think they probably would play a little bit alongside each other if all these guys get rolled out. Because then you're looking at like 9 to 10 active guys.
Yeah.
Like I don't think they're going to want to be playing like Rashawn Holmes at all or much of like Baldwin's or Anthony Gill. So I actually think that that's a good point because I think it would be definitely at least a few minutes they would play alongside each other if all these guys get rolled out.
Yeah. So we would have just in case all three of them
Hmm.
end up out, we would have Butler, Champagnie, Kispert, George, Gill, Kuzma, Baldwin, Sar, Holmes, Joval,
Yep.
10 on the
Yep.
dot. And in this scenario, it's kind of 9 because I don't see where Rashawn Holmes fits into this mess. Like,
Yeah,
we're
I
not
think he would
losing
be
any
AP.
center minutes unless they wanted to play Sar more at the 4, which seems weird. So I feel like they would be going 9. They do tend to lean on someone like Anthony Gill from time to time in these spots, but I don't think it would be a lot. I think Jared Butler would become just the jam of all jams.
Hmm.
And then you got to like win the Champagne Kispert George lottery of which one of them isn't dog shit. And then we would have to have a conversation of who closes in a blowout, which,
Right.
in theory could be somebody relevant.
Yeah, I
Like somebody
think.
that plays a lot will probably also be closing in a blowout.
Yeah, like I think like a guy like Champagnie could be like a guy that would start and possibly even close in a block. Because you saw that it's like
Yeah.
a few weeks ago, I want to say that when Washington was pretty shorthanded, he was actually closing in blowouts as well as starting.
Well, we want to pay attention to that. We will likely get that news either right at the end of this show or sometime during NBA Live Before Lock. Lucky for us, this one is a 7 o'clock start. Schedule, which I just kind of alluded to. NBA Live Before Lock will be coming up after this at 6 o'clock. You'll get Greg and Eric breaking it all down until 7. Then Greg and I will hop on playback from 7 to 8. We'll talk about ownership in Phoenix, Charlotte, which shouldn't be all that much. We'll talk about the ownership in Houston and Washington, which could be really wild to talk about. We'll start prepping our late swaps before Lakers and Dallas, and we'll stick around all the way until the tip off. Well, we'll stick around all the way till 8 o'clock. The tip off for Minnesota and the Pelicans will be long after 8 o'clock because the NBA is insane about when games actually start. But that's what we've got going on. There's still another 2.5 hours of live NBA content. 7 to 8, playback.tv/Stokastic. Come watch the game along with us. If you have League Pass, you could link it up, watch the games with us. If you don't, we have 20 VIP passes that we can hand out so that you guys can see the game as well. Game number 3, the Los Angeles Lakers. They're 7-point favorites in Dallas, 218 total. And not all that crazy here. We've got a probable tag on AD. We've got a probable tag on LeBron. We've got a probable tag on Gabe Vincent. The only major injury news is, I shouldn't have described as major, Cam Reddish is doubtful. Otherwise, it's everything we've been used to for the Lakers. We've got 20% ownership coming into Austin Reeves, 10 to AD, and around 10 to LeBron James, 5 to Max Christie, and basically nothing else. So let's start with Reeves, I guess, considering he is the highest owned guy here by a lot. I like him. I'm right around the field. I don't love it though. It's 7,300 point guard only. Like I feel like we're at the top of the Austin Reeves salary tier.
Yeah, I think honestly he's going a little bit over-owned. I don't think he's like an awful play. But at least on this slate, like kind of in the mid-range, I think there are some other interesting options. Again, the point guard only eligibility does make it a little bit tougher as well. The potential assists for Austin Reeves have been very solid, obviously, since they shipped D'Lo out of town. Like over the last 4 games, he's averaging about 70 passes made, 14 and a half potential assists. So he's pretty close to LeBron James as far as the potential assists go, which has, risen his floor, like again, 10, 11, 6, 10 assists over the last 4 games. So I think he's a fine point per dollar play, but maybe going a little bit over-owned with LeBron James and Anthony Davis both expected to play. As far as those two go, LeBron and AD both around 10%. Don't really have any super strong takes on either. I think they're reasonable contrarian options. I don't think I'm going to go out of my way to prioritize either of them. The only other guy I'll mention is Max Christie. I think he's a fine contrarian value play. 4K, pretty big part of his rotation. Over the last 5 games, he's averaging about 33 minutes per game. Not a super high usage player, but, got nice eligibility and I think a reasonable contrarian option. I don't think we can really get to anyone else, though. Like the minutes on Dalton Connect have not been great. Shake Milton's almost out of the rotation. Dorian Finney-Smith, I don't think is really necessary. He did play 26 minutes last time out, but I think I would rather get to Christie at a similar price point. I was going to take a shot in one of those like low-owned Lakers value plays. So, not really much else to add. Again, I understand why Reeves is getting the most ownership, but I think right now he's going a little bit over-owned.
So I like the shout out to Christie. That would have been the guy that I was going to do the same thing for here. I have him 13% optimal, 22% boom, target score of 29 fantasy points. He's 4K. He's shooting guard, small forward. Like I like the flexibility. We don't have a ton of value as of yet. If it doesn't show up, him being 5% owned feels a bit low. Just looking over his, recent history. I mean, he had 27 fantasy points last time out in 39 minutes. That's not a great game, but it's like dangerously close to all you need from him today. He had 43 a couple nights ago. Obviously, that one's going to be in everything you need if he happens to do that. But he flirts with that 28-29 number every now and again. It doesn't happen very frequently. I mean, it's basically only happened like twice this year, I think. Maybe 3 times. But, the minutes are a lot higher now than they were earlier in the season. I like him. I like the flexibility. I like the salary. I don't mind getting any sort of AD or LeBron. I figure they're both are in around that 10% mark, and I think that's about where they should be. I don't have too much of a take there for the rest of the Lakers. And then we get to Dallas. Let's just start. Before we even talk about ownership on Dallas, do you assume they're going to run out the same fun starting lineup they did yesterday?
I have no idea. I mean, that starting lineup was like insane. You would like if you gave me 20 guesses for the Dallas starting lineup, I would have never gotten that. Najee Marshall at the point.
No.
So honestly, I have no idea. Do you think they'll run the same starting lineup?
I mean, I would have bet heavily against that not being the starting lineup yesterday, so I might not have the best answer. I mean, it didn't go well. So I mean, I guess it went well in the first half. It did not go well in the second half, and they ended up losing. I just, I don't know what they're trying to prove with that one.
Hmm.
I mean, like, I get the idea of wanting to go a little bit bigger. I do think not having Gafford makes it a little bit more likely that you don't start Maxi Kleba in this scenario, at which
Yep.
point then you just get one of Dinwiddie or Quentin Grimes. Oh, Cam Reddish is out. How are we going to react to that news? Uh, it just makes more sense that one of Dinwiddie, Grimes, or Jaden Hardy, I don't really care which one. Hell, Brandon Williams, whatever you want. Someone that looks like a guard should probably start, but I don't think we have any reason to suspect they're going to change it. It's gross. I don't want them to change it because Najee Marshall looks awesome at 4,600. Small forward, power forward, 50% owned. If he's starting again, you going right to him?
Yeah, I think if Najee Marshall starts, he's one of the better point per dollar values in the slate. Played 33 minutes. He's just a guy that can kind of do everything. Last game in 33 minutes, 16 points, 6 boards, 3 assists. So, yeah, I think Najee's a really good value right now. The other guy getting ownership is Derek Lively. And I agree, he should be with Daniel Gafford out. The minutes should tick up for Derek Lively. I think the only concern really with Lively is potential foul trouble against Anthony Davis. Lively is pretty foul prone, so you do have to factor that in. And then with Gafford out, you're probably going to get a combination of like Kleba / Dwight Powell as the backup five. I like the call out there. Like, I don't think they're going to start Kleba with Gafford out. I think they'll probably move to the bench just to play some backup center minutes. So I think it is pretty likely that one of those guards will probably start. But
Yeah.
yeah, those are really the only two guys getting any ownership right now are Lively and Najee Marshall. I think there's some interest in some of these guards for Dallas, like a completely unowned Jaden Hardy at 4.4K. I think is a little bit interesting. So the minutes have been decent for him, 20 plus minutes in each of the last 4 games. 2 games ago against Cleveland, he actually started the second half for Spencer Dinwiddie. So seems like Dallas wants to get him out there a little bit more. So I think Hardy's a little bit interesting for tournaments. There's an outside chance he could start. Dinwiddie and Grimes completely unowned as well. I think if one of those guys end up moving into the starting lineup, they would be in play. So I think you have to monitor the starting lineup here for Dallas. I think whoever, like, if one of those guys do start, like one of Grimes, Dinwiddie, Hardy, I think whoever that is probably the guy you're going to like the best. I don't think I'm going to get to Maxi Kleba. I think he will play some center minutes, but don't really think it's necessary. You'll probably see a little bit of Dwight Powell in there as well. And then PJ and Klay Thompson also getting very low ownership. The price points make it a little bit tougher to get to those guys. Not completely out of play, but they're more just contrarian options as well. So yeah, the Dallas starting lineup to be pretty important here. If one of those guards do start, I think whoever that is probably would be a pretty interesting tournament play. I would guess though the ownership would go up on them if they end up starting.
Agreed. Agreed. I'm getting to a bunch of Marshall. I'm getting to a bunch of Lively. I'm interested. He's a terrible per minute performer, but I'm at least mildly interested in Maxi Kleba here at no ownership, 3,400 power forward center. I mean, he's about as bad as it gets from a per minute guy perspective, but with nobody around, like he hit a 29-point game in 26 minutes 2 weeks ago. That's sort of what we'd be. I mean, that's the only good game that he has had this year. I guess he followed that up with 21 in a start, which wouldn't be enough. But again, we don't have a ton of value. If Washington breaks the wrong way, like I'm a little more interested in it. Nikola Jokic now listed as probable for today. Illness.
Okay.
Okay. I don't want to advocate for Maxi, but kind of sneaky, especially if he maintains that starting spot because he has picked up some minutes lately. A 30-minute game, a 33-minute game, a 29-minute game. Could get back up to 30, but you're going to need him to have to do a little bit better than the 0.57 fantasy points per minute that I project him for.
Yeah, he's got to be at the bottom of your list of point per minute.
Ooh, let's see. I assume it's pretty damn close to the bottom. Jalen Green, no change. Dar Eason ruled out. No way. Maxi Kleba is the second worst active guy. It's PJ Tucker, leader in the clubhouse. Cam Reddish, actually, he's tied. Cam Reddish and Maxi Kleba tied for the worst per minute performers in all of basketball. So illustrious, illustrious company there. Minnesota, New Orleans. We got the Minnesota starting lineup change. last time out. We got Dante DiVincenzo in to the starting lineup. I assume they maintain that. Mike Conley down to 3,900. We're getting a ton of ownership to Minnesota. This is the most owned team on the slate right now. 4.5-point favorites in New Orleans. 30% to Ant, 20% to Gobert, 10 to McDaniels, 30 to DiVincenzo, 30 to Naz Reid, barely any to Randall and Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. What do you like the most here for Minnesota?
Yeah, so assuming they keep the same starting lineup, I think DiVincenzo probably would be the guy. He's coming in at 4.8K. He's got shooting guard eligibility as well. And you did see that, slight increase in minutes with him moving into the starting lineup. He played 31 minutes. I think you're probably going to expect around 30 from him. So I think DiVincenzo is the preferred option. Right now, it's him, it's Ant, and it's Naz Reid, all kind of hovering around 30% ownership. Anthony Edwards has been a lot more aggressive looking for a shot over the last couple games. He's averaging 30 shot attempts a game over the last 2 games. So he's been way more aggressive. There was a quote where it feels like a few games ago where he was kind of complaining about playing off ball, and he's just been way, way more aggressive. And the price has come down too on Ant. So 8.4K for Ant, I think is a really good option as well. So those two I think look really good. Obviously, I'm never gonna be mad about getting to Naz Reid. He played a lot more last game with Randall struggling, but I don't think you can expect that every single time. Let's see. Looking at the rest of the team, Rudy Gobert is down to 5.5K. Like, I think he's a bit underpriced as well. Played 38 minutes last time out. I think on average, you're probably getting low 30s minutes. So I think stands out as a pretty good point per dollar play too. Obviously, McDaniels is always playable. Never someone I'm personally excited to play, but he's consistently playing 30 plus minutes when he avoids foul trouble. Randall's pretty low owned. I think that's a little bit interesting. Again, last game, he struggled. He also dealt with some foul trouble, only played 23 minutes, but previous games, 39, 36 minutes. So I think he's at least a little bit interesting as a contrarian play. Mike Conley, as you mentioned, down to 3,900. The minutes really didn't change. It actually ticked up with him moving to the bench. He played 26 minutes. I think he's playable. I think there's probably going to be better value that opens up. But if it doesn't, he's someone you could use as a last piece in. So, Minnesota, I think is definitely one of the better teams to target. A lot of good options here.
Yeah, I got a ton of this one. A whole bunch of Dante DiVincenzo, enough of Naz Reid, equal to the field on Ant, who feels really obtainable at 8,400. No problems getting to Gobert, who's down to 5,500, which is a wild price tag. I thought I would get a little bit more Randall. I didn't. I'm just sort of with the field here. I also thought I would get quite a bit more of $3,900 Mike Conley, just given the fact that we are lacking in value, but that didn't seem to happen either. But I just want to have a bunch of Minnesota. They look fantastic. The matchup's fine. The total in this game is mid-pack. It's not the worst pace spot for Minnesota. Not the best, but not the worst. These guys just look good, and it helps that they don't really deviate from their rotation. They're running 8.5 guys. I like it. But right now, the most I have of anybody is DiVincenzo and Ant, and I hope that continues because they are the two guys I like the most. I like Naz Reid, but I'm a little under the field mark right now, and he just scares me because if Julius Randle's playing well, I don't think we see as much of Naz Reid. That's the easier way for him to get the 23 or 24 minute side of his day instead of the 27-minute side of his day. But I mean, great per minute, dude. Scared for this one, but get yourself a lot of Minnesota, guys. Especially 8 o'clock start makes me feel better for any swaps I got to make at 7:30 and at 8. Then we go to the Pels. Welcome back, Zion, I guess, available for this one. Brandon Ingram still out, Trey Murphy out, and we're waiting on a Q tag for DeJounte Murray. There is no ownership coming into these guys, except for 10% to Brandon Boston, 35% owned shooting guard, or 3,500 shooting guard small forward. Again, 10% owned. I don't really want anything here from New Orleans. I mean, give me random shares in GPPs of Herb Jones, Murray, McCollum, Messi, because they're just starters and relevant. Are you gonna get to Brandon Boston here?
No, I don't love the Brandon Boston ownership. Honestly, I think him and Jordan Hawkins are pretty similar place. Jordan Hawkins has been really struggling with his shot. If you look over the last 5 games, 2 of 9, 1 of 5, 3 of 9, 1 of 6, 2 of 10. He is someone that I think if he makes a couple more shots, I can play him a little bit more. I don't think that's a shot I'm going to take on this slate, but I think him and Brandon Boston are similar plays, and Boston's getting some love. So I'm not a huge fan of getting to a 10% Brandon Boston on this slate. Zion being back, like I think he's going to be on a strict limit, but that obviously does hurt the rest of this lineup. Keep an eye on the DeJounte Murray news. He's questionable. If he gets ruled out, that would change some things. Like CJ McCollum would have to do a lot more ball handling. He gets about an 8% assist percentage bump with DeJounte Murray and Brandon Ingram off the court. So he would look pretty good. And then if DeJounte Murray misses, I guess I don't know what they would do with the starting lineup. Who do you think would start if DeJounte can't play?
So it would be McCollum, Jones, Messi, Zion. I don't think it'd be Alvarado. I think it's just too soon coming back from that injury at this point. Feels like, yeah, probably Brandon Boston, I guess.
Yeah, that would be my guess too.
Although
either him or Hawkins, I think.
Herb Jones, CJ, Zion, Messi. Yeah, I don't think it would be Javonte Green. I could see it if they just wanted to have like another wing type guy out there to try to deal with your Anthony Edwards types. And then you just turn over point guard duties to some combination of McCollum and Zion when they're out there. But they've got that three pack of guards in Boston and Alvarado and Hawkins that it feels like it would just be one of those guys.
Yeah.
And Boston probably the leader in the clubhouse there, the guy that gets more minutes, but I'd be surprised if it were Alvarado.
Yeah, because he's only been back for like a few games, so I think they still want to ease him back in.
Yeah. I don't want to miss this super chat because it was a good one. 1-2 said DFS doofus of the night. Sean Maller. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So appreciate that super chat. Didn't want that one to slip through the cracks. Anything else you want to touch on here for the Pels? We do need that news.
No, I think we're ready to move on.
Boom. Well, let's move on to you guys signing up at Stokastic. Again, link in the description of this video. It's very easy, guys. Very easy. You just click that link. It's going to take you to a landing page. It's going to show you all of the instructions on what you would need to do to get a free month of whichever sport you're looking for. And all you have to do is sign up through one of our affiliates, whether that's on the Pick'em side or the Sportsbook side. And you're going to get something from them as well, whether that's bonus bets or a deposit bonus, something along those lines. You'll make a deposit there. You'll get whatever they're giving you. And then you'll let us know about it. And we're going to give you a month of projections, ownership, sims, Discord, everything that we have on what I would imagine is the NBA side if you're watching this show. Doesn't get any easier than that. You won't pay us a cent for the first month that you're here. Come find out what's behind the paywall. NBA is the main game in town right now that NFL is into the playoffs. And if you sign up right now, you're going to have it all the way up until just before the All-Star break. So this is a great stretch of NBA. Arguably, this is the best stretch of the NBA, the ramp up to the All-Star break. So if you want to come in, you can come in for free for a month. So do that. Also, to the 1,800 of you that are in here, we only have 170 likes. That ratio is a little light. Don't be afraid to hit that thumbs up. We don't want to make Greg and Eric feel bad, making them think nobody wanted to hit the like button for them before they got here. So come on in, guys. Come on in. Game 5. Atlanta Hawks. They are 6.5-point favorites in Utah, 238 total. This is a wild game and could get even more crazy. Now, on the Atlanta side, Trey is probable, Bogdanovich is probable, but there is no Jalen Johnson. There is no Larry Nance. We're getting 30% ownership to Trey Young. We're getting 10% ownership to Onyeka Okongwu. And we're basically getting nothing else to the rest of Atlanta. So let's just start here. How do you feel about Trey at 9,700? It's a busy price tier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like Trey. I understand why the ownership is going to him. With Jalen Johnson off the court, he gets a bit of assist percentage bump, about a 3% bump. And with him off the court, Trey Young 1.26 fantasy point per minute player. So really good matchup here against Utah. Totally understand the ownership. So yeah, I like Trey a good amount as a spend up. And then not a ton else ownership going to the Hawks, which I think is a little bit interesting. Like both centers, I think are viable tournament plays with Capella and Okongwu. Okongwu about 3x the ownership of Capella. I think it's just because of a price point thing. They will just kind of ride the hot hand. Whoever is playing better between the two, they will close with. So, both those centers I think are reasonable contrarian plays. Bogdanovich at 4.6, I think is going a little bit under-owned as well. He's been a little bit banged up, but came back in his first game back by 23 minutes. I think you're probably expecting like mid 20s minutes or so from him. So I have a little more interest in Bogdanovich right now than the field. Also, I think Ricochet is going a little bit under-owned as well. Like his minutes are a bit more secure with Jalen Johnson out. 32, 25, 28 minutes over the last few games. So I think both like Ricochet and Bogdanovich are interesting contrarian value options. Not as interested in like the other guys like Krejci or Garrison Matthews. DeAndre Hunter obviously gets a little bit of a bump in usage too, but he's up to 6.9K. I think it's kind of hard to get to him. Now, he did start the second half. Was it last game or 2 games ago? I forget. But like if DeAndre Hunter starts, I would have interest in him. If he comes off the bench, I still think it's kind of hard to get to him. So yeah, Trae Young, obviously the easiest guy to get to, but I think there's some interesting, value options with the centers, Bogdanovich and even Ricochet.
Yeah, I got a little bit more of Bogdanovich than I was expecting. 4,600 shooting guard, small forward, 7% owned. He's in 15%. So I basically 2x'd him, and I don't hate that at all. Every once in a while, he could just fall into more minutes. And when he does, I assume it's because he's playing well. I mean, offense is the name of the game for him. So if he can grab a couple extra minutes, he only needs a little bit north of 30 fantasy points today. I think that is very doable for someone with his skill set, particularly against the Utah Jazz. I'm right around the field on Trae. I got a little bit of a Kongwu. I'm actually, I got to 10% of Ricochet. It doesn't make me feel great, but 3% ownership, against Utah, a team that's filled with a bunch of guys that are like sort of his peers in talent right now. It's not like he's running up against a real rotation. So I don't mind the idea of getting to Ricochet. He could show out here in a matchup against the Jazz. The centers, though, you're best of luck to figuring out which one it's going to be between the two, because I don't even think Atlanta knows what they're going to do with their centers until that game starts. Now, Utah. Oh, here we go. So Jordan Clarkson is out. John Collins is out. Keontae George is out. Lauri Markkanen is questionable. Bryce Sensabaugh is questionable. We're getting 25% ownership to Markkanen, and we don't know if he's playing. We're getting 20 to Walker Kessler. We're getting 60 to Colin Sexton, and then we're getting another 10 to Isaiah Collier, plus some scattered ownership to Filipowski, Bryce Sensabaugh. Let's start with the easy part. Whether Markkanen is in or not, the ownership to Colin Sexton isn't all that crazy to me. I think he looks fantastic. And if Markkanen happens to be out, it's going to look even better. But he is ready for a date with a lot of Dyson Daniels, I believe.
Yep. No, I understand why the ownership is going to Colin Sexton with Keontae George, Jordan Clarkson, and John Collins off the court this year. He's got a 29% usage rate, 35.6% assist percentage. So he looks really, really good. The minutes were a little bit down last game. He only played 26 minutes in a competitive game. Like the Jazz, they just ran a weird rotation. They only had 10 guys active, but they really spread out the minutes. Like I was surprised that Patty Mills, who hadn't played in a couple months, ended up playing.
So was he.
Yep. And then Lauri Markkanen and Bryce Sensabaugh are both questionable, as you said. If they both get ruled out, we're gonna have to start looking to some of this value for Utah, like Kyle Filipowski, Johnny Juzang, Svi Mikhailuk, guys like that are gonna be firmly in play. Walker Kessler coming in around 20% ownership. I think he stands out as a pretty good option as well. He should play 30 plus minutes in this game. Collier started at the point. He's 4.2K. I assume he'll start again. He led the team potential assists in that game. His shooting has not been great. If he can actually make a couple shots, I think he could be a decent value option, but he's been struggling with a shot a bit, but I think he's like a reasonable value option. Would look better if one or both of Lauri and Bryce Sensabaugh get ruled out. I think Sexton's your top play. Lauri, if he does play too, I didn't mention him, I think is a really good option too. 7.4K, decent spot here against Atlanta. So, like him too. If one or two of those guys end up getting ruled out, then unfortunately we're going to have to look to this like gross group of value for Utah, which I would not be looking forward to.
Yeah, I've got 34% of Markkanen right now. So if he's in, he looks really good to me. If he happens to be out, that's when it starts to get ugly. The starting lineup will drive a lot of those decisions because Kyle Filipowski is going to look way different. Bryce Sensabaugh is going to look different if he's in. Micah Potter is going to look different, and he's the flat 3K power forward center eligible. Like, what do we do there? And then you got Svi Mikhailiuk just out there not playing most of the time and then falling into a shit ton of minutes every once in a while. This is going to get really gross if Markkanen is out here. And it's going to get extra special gross if he and Sensabaugh are out for this one.
Yeah, I'm hoping they both play. I really don't want to deal with this Jazz value.
No, I mean, we just got no Markkanen, no George, no Collins, no Clarkson in their most recent game. We got 30 minutes out of Kyle Filipowski. Like, if we think that we're getting 30 minutes of Kyle Filipowski today at 4,100, he is going to be very popular. That is a thing we won't really be able to avoid. Then we're going to be able to get real minutes to Kessler and Sexton. But Sensabaugh, he got 28 last time out. What if that goes from 28 to 0? Where the hell do we redistribute those? We're going to end up playing some real next level garbage for the Jazz today.
Yep, they did. They did recall Cody Williams. That's another body that they could have in their rotation if both Laurie and Sensabaugh are out.
Yeah, that's not it's not going to be fun here, but we're going to have to like a lot of the Utah Jazz if this breaks. I mean, I already like the Utah Jazz if they're both in, let alone if those guys are out. I do want to point out one thing. I saw this yesterday, but Game Rock reminded me. Walker Kessler's girlfriend just won Miss America. So he might ball out tonight. Good for him, dude. Good for him. Hell of a pull.
Yep.
I believe I saw there was a clip going out there that he was watching it on his phone with Will Hardy, like at dinner while it happened.
I think I saw that. Yep.
Doubt. I mean, I would just be talking mad shit to everybody on the team. Like, yo, my girl's Miss America. Just rubbing everybody's nose in it.
Yep.
Oh, man. Good for him. Good for him. All right. Game 6. Boston and Denver. This is the highlight of the night. 10 p.m. start, which kind of sucks. I wish this was earlier so that I could see a bit more of it. But 20% ownership coming into Jason Tatum, 10 to Tingus Pingus. But we did get news throughout the day that Derek White is questionable with an illness. I feel like he's playing until we find out anything different. This is the type of game that I feel like Derek White is going to try to play unless it's really, really bad. That said, what do you want to do here with Boston? I find it pretty easy to get to Jason Tatum. He's not 12-5 like Jokic is. He's got better positionality. There's enough flexibility here to easily get it done. He's 20% owned. He's in 20% of my lineups. I'm more than happy to get to Tatum. Do you have a Tatum stand right now?
No, I think ownership is basically correct on Tatum, so no real strong take there.
Brandon says he missed shoot around. Yeah, that's pretty commonplace when you're sick. You don't be sick and then go to shoot around and hang out with all of your teammates while you're sick. That's just pretty standard. You're not going to shoot around if you're sick.
If it was like a legit injury, then I would be leaning that he doesn't play. But since it's an illness, I still think it's like 50-50.
Yeah, same. But when it comes to not going to shoot around, you would never send somebody to shoot around if they're sick. That's just you don't do that. Doesn't mean that he's playing or not playing. Like I just don't read into that scenario when it's an illness. What do you want to do with the rest of this team, assuming White is in? Do you like anything here? I kind of like Drew Holiday more than I like the other starters, but honestly, I'd be fine getting any one of them.
Yeah, I like the Drew call. In competitive games, like the minutes have ticked up for him. Obviously, there's been a lot of blowouts, but like, he played 39 minutes against Minnesota. He played 34 there against Oklahoma City. So I think Drew's gone a little bit underowned. I also think Porzingis is a reasonable contrarian option coming in around 10%. If Derek White misses, I would assume that Al Horford shifts into the starting lineup. And then maybe a little less foul risk for Porzingis. But yeah, I like the ceiling on him too. If you can avoid foul trouble, dealt with a little bit of foul trouble last game. Not really much else though. If Derek White does not play, then again, I think Horford starts, and then you would get like a bump in minutes for Hauser and Pritchard. I don't think I could get to either of those guys though. Like the price on Pritchard is 5.9K. He actually, I don't know if you saw the Mets last game. Like he like barely played. I think he played 10 or 11 minutes. So the minutes are way down on him. But yeah, assuming everyone plays right now, I think it's Tatum as your easiest guy to get to, and then a little bit interesting for me with Porzingis and Drew Holiday.
Yeah, I'm with you on. I assume Horford starts in a scenario where Derek White's gone and probably plays a lot of minutes. I think they just throw a bunch of additional size at Jokic and try to disrupt there. I would have a hard time getting to Peyton Pritchard. I would have a hard time getting to Sam Hauser, just not a good enough per minute guy. I wouldn't even want to try to like roll the dice on Luke Cornett or something. It would just focus me a little bit more on Tatum and Brown and Holiday and Tingus Pingus. But yeah, Drew Holiday to me in this kind of matchup, like this is the one where I feel like we get the better Drew Holiday day, the more focused Drew Holiday day. Maybe that's just a defensive thing. Maybe he wants to try to attack their backcourt. I think this is a good spot for him, and I'm sure he's not at all worried about Jamal Murray on the opposite side. I don't know why anybody would. Not very good right now. But then we get to Denver. 12-5 for Nikola Jokic on DraftKings, 12-9 for Jokic on FanDuel. He's like 10% owned. Jamal Murray's about 10% owned. Michael Porter Jr. is about 10% owned. There's not a lot of ownership coming into Denver. I'm not surprised. It's a pace down spot. It's a very difficult defense, which could still be extra difficult if Derek White is in for this one. What do you want to do here? Do you want to find the salary to pay up for Jokic? Are you hoping that we just get the value so you can do it? Do you like him either way? Do you like anything else for Denver? I'm intrigued by this game.
Yeah, I find it interesting the ownership on Jokic. So I am definitely higher on Jokic right now than current ownership at about 10%. As you mentioned, I think that's kind of because of the lack of value. But man, if you're going to give me like a 10% Jokic on this slate, like that just looks very, very appealing. So I like him more than the current ownership. I also think Michael Porter Jr. is firmly in play, 6.3K. Without Aaron Gordon, the minutes have ticked up a little bit for him. So I think he's going a little bit under-owned as well. The price on like Jamal Murray and Westbrook feel about right. Christian Brown, indifferent on him. And then like I don't think it's necessary to get to like Strother or Peyton Watson on this slate. But yeah, I like Jokic, especially at only 10% ownership right now.
All right. Every single dope in chat needs to shut up right now about Nikola Jokic's injury status. He never had one. He's now probable. He's not questionable. He never was. Anybody that's saying that he's questionable or out in chat is gonzo. Just leaving. Don't let the door hit you. He's probable. He's either been not on the injury report or probable. Those are the only two statuses that Nikola Jokic has. The only one that matters right now is the fact that he is probable. Woof, guys. Jeesh. How can you all be so damn bad at this? Oh, Jordan Poole, out. That's one. Here it comes. Bilal Coulibaly, in. And finally, Bob Carrington, in. So, probably not all that interesting.
Yeah, I would say that probably doesn't do much for me for Washington.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's going to matter too much. Let's close this bad boy out. Game 7. And hit that like button if you haven't done it yet. We're up to 285 likes. We can get to 400 here. That's for sure. We've got the Miami Heat, 9.5-point dogs in Golden State, 216 total, coming off of a double OT, barely played anybody other than 5 guys type rotation for Miami. That one got a little wild. For the Heat, obviously no Jimmy Butler for today. Tyler Hero, questionable. Everything else is pretty normal for Miami. 10% ownership coming into Jaime Jaquez. No ownership coming into the rest of Miami, although Jaquez is 40% on the FanDuel side. Do you like anything here, or do we just have to like wait and hope that Hero's out to see how this changes? I don't love anything for Miami if Hero's in.
Yeah, so if Hero is in, I still think that like Jaime Jaquez is a decent play, assuming he starts. So he started last game. He played 45 minutes in double overtime, so 35 minutes overall, which is good to see. He did, I want to say, yeah, he led the team potential assists, 67 passes made, 12 potential assists. So he had the ball in his hands a good amount. Even if Hero plays, I like Jaquez. And a benefit here too is with Hero questionable, if he gets rolled out, like he's going to look a lot better. And I think with it being a back-to-back and how many minutes that Hero played, I kind of lean that he doesn't play. But that's just a lean right now. It is the late game too, which is kind of interesting. You do have another 9 o'clock game too with Boston and Denver. So, maybe trying to leave a little bit of flexibility to see what happens here. I don't think it's the worst idea. for tournaments. Let's
You could swap
see.
right to Steph if you need to, assuming you don't have Hero in the shooting
Yeah,
guard spot, which would be pretty hard to do on a slate like this.
yeah. Um,
Or Jalen Brown.
right, right. Yeah. So you could do like that. You could do like a 2v2 or something. But let's see. Looking at the rest of the Heat, I mean, no one else really getting any ownership. Like Bam would look a lot better if Hero gets rolled out. Um, Duncan Robinson, still played 25 minutes off the bench. I think he's still playable either way. They ran a very tight rotation, as you mentioned. So if they run a similar rotation to last game and Tyler Hero's out, this team could look really interesting in tournaments.
Yeah.
So yeah, right now, overall, I think my favorite play is Jaquez. He looks way better if Hero gets rolled out. I think Rozier is fine. And then some of these other plays are going to look a lot better if Hero doesn't play. Bam, Duncan, Highsmith, Jovic. So pretty interesting that this is the late game and we have a big piece of news with Hero questionable.
Yeah, it's this one will move some stuff around if he ends up out.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to hit this super chat because it's about you. Said shout out that Clintwood sent us a super chat. He said shout out to DK. I follow his Tails channel and his work helped me make the top 6 lines in the Minimax, chopped of course, and I suck at showdowns. Thanks, bro. So picked up a little bit of a dub yesterday in the Minimax from Clintwood, and all thanks to you apparently.
Love to see that. Well, appreciate the shout out, man.
Final team to look at is the Golden State Warriors. No Kuminga, no Gary Payton, no Brandon Pajemski. 20% ownership to Andrew Wiggins, 10 to Curry, Green, Schroeder, and Trace Jackson Davis. I'm matching the field on the Wiggins ownership, and I'm right around the field on Schroeder, Green, and Curry. Kind of like Golden State here against this Miami team coming in off of the ownership or off of the double OT game from yesterday. And because of the way that they're shorthanded, I feel a lot better about getting to those 4 guys that are getting a little bit of ownership. Do you like one more than the others?
Let's see. I would say probably Wiggins is the easiest guy to get to. He gets a bit of a usage bump with Kuminga off the court. I think the minutes are a little bit more secure for him as well. So I think Wiggins probably the easiest guy to get to. Last game for Golden State was a massive blowout. So you didn't see any of the starters play in the fourth quarter. Wouldn't be worried too much about that. They've been running a bit of a tighter rotation of late for Steve Kerr. So the 3 guys getting ownership against Steph, Draymond, Wiggins, I think are all reasonable options. I think Wiggins, like I said, get the easiest to get to. Trace Jackson Davis is 5.2K. He's coming in around 10% ownership. Looney's kind of been out of the rotation, so the minutes have been solid for TJD. In competitive games, he's been averaging like mid-20s minutes or so. So I think he's another reasonable option you can get to. Like I think you'll see, obviously, slow-mo in the rotation. I don't think it's necessary to go there. Buddy Hield's been struggling. His price is cheap. I still don't think I can get to him either. So I think mainly it would be Wiggins, Draymond, Steph. And I think looking at the eligibility, Wiggins probably the easiest one to get in your lineup.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I don't mind getting a little bit of additional Steph just because it's a late game, and if stuff's popping up throughout all of this, maybe that I can move it around a little bit. But I do think Wiggins is the guy that looks the best here, given that positional eligibility, given that price, and the fact that Kuminga is not around. He's just going to be out there for those minutes. Top of the hour, man. Tell the people where to find you.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter, DK__DFS, or on YouTube, DK DFS.
There it is, everybody. NBA Live Before Lock coming up next. Get ready. I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of news coming in while we switch because it happens every time we do this. See you guys at 7, but Live Before Lock is right now.
Thanks.
Are you the next number is 2? There you go. What is happening, everybody? Welcome to NBA Live Before Lock, where, once again, the tradition never ends. Jordan Poole rolled out just a few minutes before you and I are about to be getting on here, Eric. So we've got a piece of news to talk about right at the top. We've got a ton of players who are questionable today. And by a ton, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is this the most players we've had questionable at the start of one of these shows the entire year?
No, we've had some more, but I mean, this is just kind of scattered all over the place. And also, this is the first time we've like gone all the way until the 10 p.m., 7 p.m., like where the main slate on DraftKings had both of the games from the late window involved. So it's, I guess, probably a higher likelihood of having things that we're still waiting on.
Yeah, I mean, we got a bunch of key players that are questionable, like you said, spread throughout the night. Jordan Poole is one of them. He's just been ruled out. So that is going to be an interesting talking point for us right here. And also, if you guys haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. DeJounte Murray's questionable. Lauri Markkanen's questionable. Tyler Hero's questionable. Jalen Green is questionable. Derek White is questionable. We also got Bryce Sensabaugh questionable, which typically he's not somebody who would matter a ton. But when you consider that the Jazz are already shorthanded, that's something that could open up even more playing time for somebody like Colin Sexton, or at least shore up his minutes floor. But it's really just these key players who are questionable spread out throughout the night, where this seems like it's heading towards a pretty big late swap slate. And I'm going to ask you in a second what you make of Jordan Poole being rolled out and if that's going to change anything for you on the Washington side. But I have a couple of players who are questionable that I feel pretty strongly aren't going to play. I'm wondering if you feel the same way at all.
Yeah, I think Jalen Green doesn't play. I think that's the one that I'm pretty confident of.
So for me, we've got Tyler Hero questionable after the Heat played a double overtime game, which just absolutely fucked my shit up yesterday. I have a feeling that Tyler Hero doesn't play. Downgraded questionable late in the day after he played. How many minutes did he end up playing?
Infinity minutes yesterday. And he had 2 fouls in like the first 2 minutes of the game. If you were watching it, it was kind of one of the weirder game scripts, weirder games I've watched.
49 minutes for Tyler Hero yesterday, and he's questionable today. That to me is an indicator that he is not going to end up playing today. So that's my lean there. And also Derek White dealing with an illness, wasn't present at shoot around today. Just considering how the Boston Celtics have generally approached guys who aren't 100% this year, I don't think Derek White plays either. And now both of those players are in later locking games and the latest locking games on the entire slate. Because typically, like you said, we don't have these 10 p.m. Eastern time games on the main slates on DraftKings and FanDuel. Usually they've been on FanDuel this year, not been on DraftKings. DK has decided to include both of them today. So this is going to be a night where we're going to have to be waiting for those news items to drop. And I think that we are going to get no Tyler Hero today. And I think there's going to be no Derek White, both those games starting at 10 p.m. Eastern time, Eric.
Well, then, I mean, you got to just talk about what you're doing to account for it, because I haven't done it yet. I do think they're closer, I think Derek White's closer to 50-50. It's an illness. He wasn't ever going to be at shoot around. So with an illness there that popped up, it's hard for me to know. I would probably be leaning towards him being out with you if you made me, but I think it's closer to like a 55-45 type scenario. And Tyler Hero, popping up as questionable. This team's been in disarray. It feels like if you're going to completely revamp your team here with Jimmy Butler, there might be worlds where there are multiple pieces moving out from the Miami side. You want to keep all of your assets as not as fresh as possible. I mean, you're still going to be playing Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, tons of minutes here, but on a back-to-back feels like an unnecessary risk to take with Tyler Hero, who already has a pretty bad image based on the Dame Lillard trade talks from a year and a half ago, has a pretty bad image as far as what his trade value is going to be and what Miami would want back for him. So it just feels like, put him on the shelf for a night.
So, and I'm not saying that I'm guaranteeing these two guys both sit. It's just more the direction I'm leaning that things are going to end up.
What do you think about Lauri Markkanen? I think that's a pretty big one because it happens, previous to both of them. And if we don't have news on Hero and White, and you're already pretty confident that both of them are sitting, are you doing anything here with Utah with Lauri Markkanen and Bryce Sensabaugh questionable?
So that one I think is a little bit easier. I still am going to have to update lineups for the Kyle Kuzma, or I kind of revealed my hand. I like Kyle Kuzma as an option now that Jordan Poole's out. We just got a projections update. I'm really interested to see where Kyle Kuzma's ownership ends up landing. But anyway, on the Lord Markkinen thing, if I'm going to have additional value open up from that game, as things stand right now, I already get to a good amount of exposure from that time slot because you've got in there at 9 p.m. the Hawks taking on the Utah Jazz, and you've already got like Colin Sexton shows up in a bunch of lineups for me. Walker Kessler already shows up in a bunch of lineups for me. So with that being the case, and then also I'm going to try to backload my lineups a little bit because I don't think that Tyler Hero and Derek White play. I don't have to make too many accommodations for that because I do think that that is going to be just already available spots in my lineup. Something that was really annoying to me yesterday is once we got that dumb starting lineup for the Dallas Mavericks is I'm doing the playback show with Josh. I'm saying I want to play as much Najee Marshall as possible, but I had so much exposure already, the 76ers and some other spots. I was able to get well overweight to the field on Najee Marshall, but I want him to be in like 70% of my lineups, and it just wasn't that viable. And during the show yesterday, I said to you, the one regret I have about the 76ers value is that it's on the first game of the slate. And if unexpected news drops, it's going to preclude me from being able to get to it. So for today, though, just because looking at the spots I have available in my lineups, I think I'll be able to react to whatever ends up happening in the market and Sensible.
Yeah, I think as the night was going on yesterday, I mean, I got to a ton of Najee Marshall, but yeah, obviously I would have wanted to get to like 70% too. I got to like half of that, but it was still one of those slates that was frustrating because it felt like I got so much right. And then Giannis puts up a triple-double and completely sinks me, basically, because it was him versus Wemby. I was under on Wemby. I was over on Giannis. And that one decision point alone ended up kind of sinking my night. But I feel pretty good about this one. I guess my other thing is that you bring up the Philly spot from yesterday. I think there's a very good chance we're walking into that with Houston today. I think if Jalen Green gets ruled out, which I find to be the more likely scenario, we're going to talk about Cam Whitmore being like the can't miss value piece of the day at 4,100. There's a chance he could even step into a starting lineup. We already have Amin Thompson, who looks great. We already have a pretty nice tournament piece in Fred VanVleet, I think. Dylan Brooks, Alperen Sengun, you could take it or leave it based on positionality, and then Dylan Brooks just being Dylan Brooks at his price. But I think there's a really good chance that we talk a lot about Houston relative to later breaking news and how Cam Whitmore looks compared to them.
All right, so let's talk first about the Jordan Poole scenario here. We've got projections updated for the Washington Wizards. So if you wouldn't mind, Jordan, pull these up on screen here because no Jordan Poole for Washington. And the one thing that's annoying about this team is they are just so dog shit terrible that at any point in time, the Wizards could lose a game by like 60 points and then just starters or guys that matter don't end up playing the fourth quarter. But here's what we have now. Jordan Poole out. We've got everybody else who is questionable. They're going to be in tonight for Washington. But if you look at the way that things are shaping up right now, Kyle Kuzma, we've got him projected for 33 fantasy points. So he's a guy who stands out as a value option. And then Jared Butler off the bench as well. Min price, 3K. Projected for just under 20 minutes, but he's a viable fantasy producer. And because he is min price, he looks like a decent points per dollar play. First reaction, or I guess it might not even be your first reaction because we've been sitting on this for a little bit now, but what do you make of Jordan Poole being out tonight?
I think it's awesome for a guy like Jared Butler, who won even coming off the bench, which is kind of what I think we're assuming and what you should be assuming here. I think Carrington, Coulibaly are your starting backcourt, and then Shampenny, Kuzma, Sarr probably looking at like your other three spots in that starting lineup. I'd be surprised to get a different iteration of it than that. Kaishan George off the bench, whatever, Corey Kispert off the bench, whatever. But the big one for me is with Malcolm Brogdon out, Jordan Poole out, I think you're really shoring things up for a guy like Jared Butler, who is a flat 3K, comes off the bench. 20 minutes you saw last time out against New Orleans, he can get it done pretty darn quickly. I think at 3K flat, because he's kind of blowout immune, I really like the idea of getting him as like a fundamental piece in your lineups. We might have, it's looking really nice at 21.5. I had him at 20 and he already was, somebody was popping up. So I just said that we have 21.58 there on him. He makes a ton of sense. And then Kyle Kuzma, I mean, coming into the starting lineup, that was something that kind of burned some unders that I had from Portfolio EV, where all of a sudden Kuzma's starting 13 for 23, 28 real life points, completely nuked everything that I had going there. But Kyle Kuzma at 6K, pretty undeniably solid as well. But with a ton of other pieces coming up later, getting to anything that isn't like a premium piece is something you want to consider when making a couple of lineups. And then in 150, do you want to be holding hands with 20-25% Kyle Kuzma? Or are you looking at potentially getting elsewhere? We'll see kind of what happens and what breaks in the next 46 minutes.
Yeah, so this is why I was really interested to see what Kyle Kuzma's ownership projection was going to be once we got our first update. He's currently at 18% ownership, which I think is pretty reasonable. I do want to be overweight to the field on Kyle Kuzma because I always like to talk about this a good amount. Some of the historical pricing of players and what do they look like when we just see a normal roll from them previously. In the past, Kyle Kuzma, if you go back to last year, do you remember how expensive Kyle Kuzma was?
Oh, yeah. We had like 8,500 Kyle Kuzma slates, 9K Kuzma slates.
We did. And this is more or less the same situation now. And if you look at Kyle Kuzma's playing time, it's on the way up. So he missed a ton of time it was a rib injury. So it's not something that he came back and I think they're monitoring his minutes because of it being like a hamstring strain or anything like that. I think his conditioning just needed to get up to par. So he's played 4 games since coming back from injury. He played 21 minutes in the first game, which was a blowout. Happens a bunch in Wizards games. He played 22 minutes in the second game. Also a blowout because it was a Wizards game, although actually won that game via blowout. So not the typical blowout we see from Wizards games. Then they move him into the starting lineup. First game starting, we got 28.5 minutes out of Kyle Kuzma. Last game, his second game starting, 31 minutes out of Kyle Kuzma. If this game is competitive, I think that we are getting a full allotment of minutes from Kyle Kuzma. Earlier on in the season, Eric, we saw him play north of 40 minutes. That's the most he's played this year. Played 40.5 minutes in a game a game against the Atlanta Hawks where the Wizards ended up winning. I'm not saying he's going to play 40 minutes or anything like that, but I think we are going to be getting mid-30s minutes out of Kyle Kuzma at a price point where he's $2,500 versus peak from last year.
Yeah, I mean, his second highest amount of minutes is 35. So, I mean, take that for what you will. I mean, there's a range of outcomes that I think doesn't go beyond 36 minutes unless there's overtime, like period, end of story. I'd actually be shocked if he played more than that, especially like you look at who sits behind him there. You can play Kispert at a 3/4. You can play Anthony Gill at the 4. You can play Kaishan George at the 3/4. They don't need to play 36 minutes of Kyle Kuzma here. And I mean, it's obviously a game, obviously we're considering, hey, what does it look like in a competitive spot? They're like 13-point dogs still. I mean, they're one of the biggest one of the biggest home dogs that we've had all season long. And I think rightfully so, but there's definitely a downside to Kyle Kuzma minutes, I think, as well.
Yeah. I mean, if they get blown out, which is at the top, talk about it, it's a dog shit team. There's no team worse in the NBA than the Washington Wizards. They've got bad players who also don't fit together. It's a terrible combination. Also a bunch of guys who don't play defense at all. So you got this Wizards team that is 13-point underdogs at home. Yeah, it's very live that they could go out and just get the doors blown off them in this game. And then we don't see Kuzma at all in the fourth quarter. I just like the upside. And that was one of the reasons, too. I was curious to see his ownership because I was going to be a little bit more tepid on Kuzma if he was like 30% owned or something like that. But ownership in the teens, he's a guy I want to be overweight to because I think there's pretty significant upside. And I personally always prefer to be early on these guys than I want to be late. Like same thing. I want to be early to Kawhi Leonard when Kawhi Leonard gets ramped up. He's looked pretty decent as of late. Not exactly relevant to tonight, but I kind of feel the same way about Kyle Kuzma. And I think this is the spot. Like I don't think there's another game, maybe one more game where we get a buy low spot on Kyle Kuzma and then it's going to be gone.
I get it. It's still, I mean, it's uncomfortable. I get wanting to get overweight to him. I mean, you bring up the historical pricing, you bring up some rates from last year without Jordan Poole on the floor. I mean, the guy can definitely go out and get it done, but it's just so dicey when you're talking about losing out on an entire fourth quarter, potentially on a chalky early piece. And there's like, it's a different position, but like Colin Sexton at a flat 6K is like unavoidable chalk to me. I can avoid chalk that exists in very dicey spots against a really good defense.
Chalk, though?
What makes Kuzma chalk?
He's not like popular.
No, but I'm saying we'll see as things get updated. I have a feeling he'll be more popular than 18%. If he's not, I'm probably with you where I end up over as well. But I'm just saying that there is such a marked downside to the minutes in a fourth quarter against a Houston team that defensively gets things done. And also, you're taking off potentially the worst defender in that starting 5 in Jalen Green. anything you insert, even Cam Whitmore, you put him into the starting lineup or you put Jayshawn Tate, you're getting improvement on the defensive end for Houston. It's not a 1-for-1 where, you know, obviously the usage, like Cam Whitmore, I think is, I'm not going to call him a better basketball player than Jalen Green, but like there's no doubt that Jalen Green's the weakest of the 5 defenders. And, you know, your overall defense for Houston is going to project out better without Jalen Green playing in the game. So like there's ways of me finding a downside to it, but I'm with you. If he stays sub 20%, I'm on board with it.
Yeah, so we'll see as we get more updates here. I know as soon as I update my lineups, we're going to get a Jalen Green is out update, and then I'm just going to have to rerun everything again. But
I'm waiting on it at this point.
This is the game we play, so I am about to go ahead and update all of those lineups here with the updated ownership and all that. One final thought here on Kyle Kuzma, just his rates from last year. Per 36 minutes last year with Jordan Poole off the court, he scored 46.13 DraftKings points per 36 minutes. So if we are going to get a full allotment of minutes from Kyle Kuzma, like I think that's not a completely unreasonable place that we could see him end up going there. Let's see what we have as far as questions. I saw some super chats that came in and some big ones too. We've got one here from G Money the Don. G Money the Don says he won the $3 on DK for 4K last night, and he thanks us for it. So shout out to G Money the Don. And then he left another follow-up super chat, said, thanks for the info, guys. G Money, love to see it. If you didn't do it already and you have the Stokastic avatar, tweet at us and also tag the Stokastic HOF, because you get yourself a free subscription for that. And something all you guys should be doing if you want to get a chance to win some free stuff. Download the Stokastic avatar, and then if you have a win, tag us, tag the Stokastic Hall of Fame. If you have a really big win, Lofty will make a ring for you that gets sent to you. So no reason to not be playing with the Stokastic avatar. Shout out to SC, who gifted us 5 YouTube memberships. Also left us a super chat. Says, don't forget to hit that like. Best show in the biz. Thanks, guys. Thank you, SC, for supporting us. And same with Chris Williams, who gifted out 5 YouTube memberships. So Chris and SC, thank you guys, as always, for supporting the channel here. And then if there are any questions in Discord for us, one of the perks being a Stokastic sub is you do get access to that Discord channel. And we do have a couple of questions that are in here for us. First one is from Einsteinium. And Einsteinium wants to know, what are our thoughts on LaMelo as a spend up tonight? And then also, what are our thoughts on Risa Shea tonight compared to some of the guys in his range that are chalk? So first, let's talk about LaMelo and some of the pay up options. Eric, what do you make of LaMelo Ball? We've got LaMelo priced at $9,500 on tonight's slate, taking on a Phoenix Suns team that appears to be one of like half the teams in the league that are in complete disarray at the moment.
Yeah, they're definitely in disarray. They righted the ship for one day, probably one day only. Actually, this is a pretty darn good spot if you're Phoenix. You're walking into a pretty soft second half of a back-to-back. But my big issue with LaMelo is not necessarily how he looks. It's the fact that Trae Young is $200 more. And Trae Young without Jalen Johnson on a floor, I mean, this is just going to be all the usage, all the assist rate you can possibly handle. Anybody who gets inserted into that starting lineup, whether it's Krejci, whether it's whomever they go with, I mean, Trae Young is going to get and absorb even more of that assist goodness, and he just looks incredible today. And then you below it have a guy that I think in Alperen Şengün we could end up having a ton of in the event that Jalen Green's out for 200 less. Those are two guys, obviously one's at the same position as him, the point guard spot, but Şengün I do think is going to end up being somebody that I'm overweight to when it's all said and done. And I'm just not really landing on him because we have Jokic, we have Anthony Davis, we have Jason Tatum, we have all the expensive guys above him that I think we're going to have enough value to kind of get to, whether it's Najee Marshall, Cam Whitmore, some combination of these 4K players that are scattered throughout the entire board. As the night goes on, I'm going to find it hard to pass up a Jokic and those raw points, or, you know, some guys that I just kind of prefer that, you know, project for 4.5 more than him and aren't in the first game of the slate.
Yeah. So next, so LaMelo, a couple of things. I don't love the start time of his game. There's also just other pay up options I prefer. I'm sure he'll land in my player pool when I have everything updated, but just not the highest priority for me. And then Risa Shea, somebody who you envision yourself getting to as a value option.
Yeah, Risa Shea is interesting because it feels like he's never going to get like that real extended run that you're looking for out of the rookie there. And this is kind of the time of the year, like we're reaching the halfway point where you can kind of see whether or not a rookie is going to get their minutes really pushed beyond where they're at. He's kind of stuck in that 26, 28 minute kind of spot. And at 4,400, it's a little different than when he was 3,900 or 4,100. Like the price has already come up to react to no Jalen Johnson. There's also DeAndre Hunter, who continues to play more and more and more as this season has gone on. I guess he's kind of been capped around like the 27, 28 minute mark as well here of late. But against Utah, I get the idea of trying to go off and find something that's lower owned from that specific spot, but not my favorite here on the slate.
Yeah, Risachet. Also, because once again, going back to trying to backload although it is a 9 p.m. start time, so maybe that's not really. I'm just used to Hawks. My initial thought was, it's going to be an early game. That's not actually the case. But even with that said, there's just going to be better value options that open up over the course of the day. And Risachet, another guy too, who, top pick in the draft. He clearly has talent. We've seen it at times. But with that said, the ceiling very rarely shows up in a way that would actually be needed to take down a GPP. He had that one massive game against the Knicks.
He had one absolute Hulk slam this entire season where he put up like he
scored like 60 fantasy points against the Knicks. And I was like, hey, look at all the talent this kid has. You can see the upside. And this is literally the only time he's done it the entire year. Other than that, there hasn't been a single slate where you remotely needed him. It's just hard for me to believe there's a realistic upside for Risachet. And while he's cheap, it's not like he's cheap relative to what his scores have been this year. He's top 30 fantasy points like twice the entire season.
Yeah, the right tail has not been what you want it to be for a guy like that. Again, this is a good spot. It's at Utah, taking on a Utah team that we know defensively has no interest in playing it outside of Walker Kessler in the interior at times. And then you've got Risachet at 4,400 with small forward, power forward, where no Jalen Johnson on the floor. I could see it, but it's just a little bit thin. I think the best part about saying, hey, if you're playing one lineup, having it there is that you have access to that lineup spot. Like Boston, Denver, Miami, Golden State, and then obviously the game that you would be sitting on here, Atlanta, Utah. Anything that's going to get you onto a piece like that's a little bit later. And it's like, all right, if worse comes to worse, I'm able to react to how Cam Whitmore's box score looks. I'm able to react to how other chalk pieces in the early window of games does. Najee Marshall, who starts, an hour and a half before Atlanta, Utah, you can kind of react to his box score, where I'd feel a lot better knowing that Marshall and Whitmore failed and then firing up a guy like Risachet, who's at least consistent. There's at least that.
We got a handful more. Boy, everybody was winning. Boy, this is going to be a sour one for me. JT Mack, shout out to him. Shipped the Winter Warrior contest for $25K last night. Thanks for the daily content, fellas. So, JT Mack, I had no clue that those Winter Warrior contests were last night. I would have won that contest. My top ROI lineup would have been the high score one. I had no clue it was last night. So I'm in playback last night, and people are talking about like, hey, look, EMAC won $700 in one of the Winter Warrior contests. And then I go look up the contest in the standings. Like, boy, I probably should have entered in those. Just didn't know the contests were last night. But with that said, if I didn't win it, I'm happy that it ended up being one of you guys that took it down. So shout out to JT Mack. And then he also wants to know, who are our favorite plays for the 555 contests tonight? So higher dollar contest, smaller field. In that kind of scenario, Eric, number one, who's your favorite pay up option? And we'll talk about some of the value options that we like in a high dollar, in not single entry, the 555, but not like 150 max setting or anything like that. Ownership a little bit more condensed. So if you are building lineups for that using the contest generator in the Sims, definitely one that you'd want to put on the high stakes setting. But for the 555 contest, Eric, who's the pay up option you'd be gravitating towards the most?
Anthony Davis.
It is. There's a couple I have my eye on. I don't know about you. I don't have a ton of exposure to the super expensive guys as of right now.
Yeah, I don't have as much Jokic and Davis as I would want here at the moment, but I have a lot of interest in getting to Anthony Davis when it's all said and done. I need the Whitmore thing to break my way. If Whitmore, I have a set of lineups already built out where if Cam Whitmore is in, I'm just firing it up to the moon, and then I'll have all the Anthony Davis.
So Trae Young, one I definitely like at $9,700. That's somebody who I have a good amount of interest in. I don't get to the Jokic or the AD types as of right now. If more value was to open up, like maybe Jalen Green gets rolled out in the next few minutes, that could potentially change that equation. I'm sitting here waiting for that news. But as of right now, Trae Young is the pay up option I get the most exposure to. Another direction that I think you could possibly go, Anthony Edwards, a little bit underpriced at $8,400. A lot of my lineups as of right now are kind of built in that mid range. Some of the guys like, Najee Marshall, also want to see what is the Dallas Mavericks lineup? Are they going to just do the most, dumbass shit ever and just be like, hey, let's go 2 wings and 3 centers in the starting lineup again?
Let's go nuke of the night.
Well,
Nuke
we've
the
got to
night.
finish answering his question.
Oh, come on now. Let's go.
Finish answering his question.
I'm so ready. Let's finish answering
We'll answer his question, then we could do it.
Okay.
So anyway, as far as the cheaper guys, and these are all going to be popular plays, but like Najee Marshall, Colin Sexton, Derek Lively, I think these are guys who certainly make a whole lot of sense. But as a little bit more of a contrarian option, who is not pulling a ton of ownership at the center position, that I'm going to be overweight to. I like it for small field stuff as well as large field stuff. Walker Kessler at $6,400. We've already got the Jazz shorthanded. There's also a chance that Lauri Markkanen doesn't end up playing. That would be something that benefits Walker Kessler a whole bunch. So he's pulling modest ownership at 18% right now. He's somebody I want to be overweight to. Anybody else you would say is a good option for the 5-5-5? If not, we could do the nuke of the night because it seems you've got a name on the tip of your tongue you're dying to give out.
Nikola Jokic now questionable. Fuck off.
Jalen Green will play.
Nikola Jokic now questionable.
All right. So let's talk about that. By the way, Jalen Green is in, so we don't have to worry about that aspect of this anymore. I don't think Jokic is going to play.
I don't either. That's so insane. Wow. All right. We got so much to do, guys. So much to see. So what's wrong with taking the back streets? You never know if you don't go. You never shine if you don't glow.
I thought that song was about butt sex for the longest time, by the way. That's what I thought.
That does not shock me. Most things are about butt sex to you. But anyway, we got Nikola Jokic. I'm taking him out of my player pool right now, which I didn't anticipate talking about. And also vindicated. I am selfish. I am wrong. That is definitely going to be chat. Right leading into this one, because I heard that there was some turnover, some people getting a little zesty in the chat about Jokic. He was still probable, but yeah, no, he's definitely questionable now. And that is going to change kind of everything about this slate because, I mean, all right, we got the normal starting lineup: Carrington, Koulibaly, George, Kuzma, Sarr for Washington. So I don't know. Champagny, I guess, isn't in that starting lineup. So Champagny,
it's
going to be
Kuzma. It's because Kuzma's back in the starting lineup.
Makes sense. Well, Kuzma was in the starting lineup last game. So Kyle Kuzma was back in the starting lineup last game. But here we go. I don't know what to say other than like Russell Westbrook, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., and then like, do they go Dario Saric? Do they like dust him off as opposed to going DeAndre Jordan? You can't start DeAndre Jordan against Kristaps Porzingis like that. That isn't even like allowed, I think. So I think you dust off Dario Saric. He hasn't been in the rotation for like 2 months, but like, I just don't understand how you would even remotely entertain DeAndre Jordan starting in this spot.
I mean, you also have to be concerned about some of the blowout potential in this game.
Oh, for sure. But Peyton Watson is going to look incredible. 3,700. Michael Porter Jr., 6,300. And then, I mean, Russell Westbrook at 6,700 in a game where you just tell him to go run around and do your just Russell Westbrook stuff. Like, Russell Westbrook's going to look insane without Jokic on the floor.
I mean, all of these guys would look really good in a scenario that Jokic doesn't play. I guess we should also try to figure out here now is how are we going to accommodate our lineups to make room for the potential of Jokic sitting? And what will this do to our lineups if he ends up playing with this being a 10 p.m. start? There we go. Derek White ruled out. Well, this is going to help at least a little bit. So I was going to, by the way, I'll just tip my nuke of the night right now. My nuke of the night was going to be still going to be Drew Holiday. The idea was going to be, and now it looks a little bit less like a contrarian option, but I've really liked having Drew Holiday preloaded into my lineups at $5,200. Potentially from getting a couple extra minutes with the absence of Derek White. Now Derek White for sure going to be out. So Drew Holiday, his ownership's going to come up now, but I thought that he was somebody who was way under the radar for this slate.
Yeah, he is a good option. I think Peyton Pritchard's a good option too. I covered some stuff on Pritchard today. 19.5% usage up to north of 22.5% without Derek White on the floor. generally because he's going to be staggered and he's going to avoid being on the floor with like a Tatum and a Brown at the same time, although that isn't always true. But you see like a 3% change in his usage this season with Derek White off the floor. The minutes obviously have a place to go. We had him around 25 and change earlier today as I was working through some prop stuff. Peyton Pritchard is going to be somebody who I definitely want to take some looks at, especially if now we're going to be looking at some blowout risk. He's definitely somebody that, just kind of boost up, get some more of these guys, but hopefully we can get everything updated within the next 5-10 minutes and be ready to rock because, man, this news came out well earlier than what I was anticipating. But, man, the Jokic question mark, he's either going to be the best low-owned center option play like of all time, or he's going to end up being somebody that you just want to be building around everybody else on his team and just hoping, obviously that he sits because sitting against the perennial best team in the NBA at home, some might call it ducking. Other people might call it gamesmanship. It is what it is. I think you want to play a lot of Denver.
I would be, I don't want to say shocked if Jokic plays, but I really don't expect him to at this point.
No,
we've also,
no, I don't either.
The flu is going around the NBA, right? We've been seeing guys get sick. And typically when guys have gotten sick, this has been the pattern. Derek White, downgrade to questionable during the day, gets ruled out later at night. It's just been the pattern more often than not in these scenarios.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to build with him out. I don't know what else to do other than just kind of roll with it for the time being. I'm running some stuff here in the background with some rates that have, Jokic off. It's just like something that we don't see a whole hell of a lot, but I don't think it should surprise you. Who do you think the best fantasy producer is on the entire team with Jokic off the floor this season?
So are you just like points per minute?
Yeah, just DraftKings points per minute.
I would assume Jamal Murray.
Russell Westbrook, 1.18. Jamal Murray, 1.11. And don't forget, Aaron Gordon is also out. So, this is just going to be unbelievable, the amount of Denver Nuggets as I start to fire this up. Yeah, so Russell Westbrook is now my highest owned player because I'm projecting him for 1% right now. So I got to change the ownership here on this, and that's why it's happening. But I'm quite positive Russell Westbrook will end up being a massive part of my slate. Jamal Murray will end up being less so, just because we're at 7,700 for him. There's obviously some blowout risk that comes into play here as well. But I guess Peyton Watson at 3,700 is probably the one that I'm having the toughest time figuring out exactly what I want to do with. I guess I'll just ask you, who's going to be the fifth starter if Jokic isn't out there?
Has he missed any games this year? I'm trying to remember. I have to pull this up.
I don't think so.
Let's see. Has Jokic sat any games this year? Have we seen him miss? Yes, he sat out. Oh, that's right. He sat out 3 games this year. All right. Who'd they start? They started in those games Dario Saric. They started. Okay. So Jokic has missed 3 games this year. They started Saric in the first one, Saric in the second one, and in the third one. If it's Saric again, then my answer has to be Dario Saric.
Yeah. It's like spot starting. The guy's just been sitting on the sideline the entire time.
Saric just started all 3 games that he's been out. Okay. I'm guessing Dario Saric starts.
Yeah, they just dust him off at 3,100. Nobody's going to be talking about him. Nobody's going to be accommodating necessarily for Dario Saric, and I think you probably should be. He also is the natural fit in a matchup against Kristaps Porzingis. It would just be so weird to me to have DeAndre Jordan. I almost said Ayton. DeAndre Jordan be the guy that you want out there against Porzingis. Porzingis will just tool him. It won't even be funny.
Let's see what we have. Oh, that's right. People in chat bringing up he had the baby. That's what it was. He had the child, and then he was gone for 3 games. I remember that now. That was the reason he was out. We got a couple more super chats here. Purple Plus, shout out to you. Took first in a small NFL showdown with no chop. Thank you, guys. Shout out to you, Purple Plus. Good stuff. And then Jeff Williams, if Hero is out tonight, who benefits? Yeah, so the guy who I was, and I'm going to still be boosting him, but I have to rebuild everything now, is the guy that I want the most from the Heat in this scenario that Tyler Hero doesn't play is Terry Rozier.
Yeah, probably Terry Rozier. The other guy that I think you want to be boosting a little bit, and this is the hottie take. Alec Burks, I bet, plays a little bit more. Everybody got massive minutes. And one of my nuke of the night considerations I had until I realized that he's going to be projected for like no fantasy points and no ownership. Alec Burks played all of 5 minutes in the last outing against Utah. He's been out. He didn't play a single minute yesterday. I think on the back-to-back, there's a world where we see him inserted into a lot of minutes. But I think the real interesting question is, like, if you get Hero out, you get Rozier starting. They've shown Duncan Robinson they want to have him coming off the bench here a little bit more lately. If it's not him, I do think there's a world where we see Alec Burks actually starting. I know that might be an insanely hot take.
We'll see. I mean, the Heat might even end up ruling out more guys by the time
Highsmith played 46 minutes yesterday. Jovic, for whatever reason, only played 20 minutes, and he was like playing, I thought, pretty well throughout that game. It was a really weird one going back and forth with like some of the evening games and stuff. Like that was the only one that we had in like the late window, I suppose, at 7 p.m. and it went forever. But Jovic only playing 20 minutes was really weird to me. I think there was some consideration where, you know, they decided to kind of go a little bit easier on him to maybe utilize him more tonight. But yeah, Jaime Jaquez, 5,200, 46 minutes, 61 fantasy points yesterday. That was just absolute insanity. But I'm with you where I think there's going to be more that we want to get to. But now we just kind of like backload our lineups without thinking about it. Like you're going to have so many more lineup spots to devote to news.
So here's something also. Shout out to K Rosette 08. He gifted out 20 YouTube memberships. So thank you very much for supporting the channel. I'm really weighing how much exposure I even want to the first 2 locking games on the slate at this point. I was talking up wanting Kyle Kuzma. I didn't know that this shit was going to happen though.
Yeah, so, you liar.
So now we've got Nikola Jokic in our estimation more likely to sit than end up playing. I don't want a ton of exposure to the early games. Like there's going to be some pieces that are unavoidable, but who is it that you think we do need to get some exposure to from the early games? And then what else could we forego to just have our lineups a little bit more backloaded so we're better prepared to make late swaps?
Let's go around the corners. Let's go to each team. Phoenix, nothing, right?
Phoenix, in terms of like must-haves, nothing. I'm cool with not having exposure there.
I have 4% LaMelo Ball, and I have 2% Mark Williams.
Reasonable. Yeah, if you got a couple lineups here and there, and you're playing a bunch of lineups, understandable. If you're playing single entry or just building 1, 2, 3 lineups, wouldn't have anybody from Charlotte.
Okay, now let's go to the other game, Houston. Basically, just Amen Thompson at this point for me.
I want some of Şengün just because in the event that a bunch of value opens up, there's a high enough ceiling for Şengün. Yeah. And not that I want like 30% of Şengün or anything like that, but he is enough of a ceiling and to where if more value opens up, he's only going to look better throughout the night to where I still have Şengün interest.
Yep, that's going to be AD for me, but I totally get it. Like that'll be half an hour later for LA Dallas. So I'll deal with that when we come to it. But it's basically Amen Thompson, a little bit of Şengün. I like that. I currently have 0 Şengün after my last run of this. And then Washington, I'm just going to kind of open it up because I think that this is probably the one that we're going to probably get trace amounts of guys. Kuzma, I'm still going to get to a little bit. I'm not going to be completely fading him. I'm not going to be completely fading Kaishan George, it would appear, at 3,600. And then Butler, I guess, is now the really tough one because that's taking up a lineup spot at point guard that is extremely valuable for me with Russell Westbrook is like a priority play now.
Yeah, I'll have a couple lineups with Butler. I'll have some lineups with Kuzma, but not what I thought I was going to have like 8 minutes ago or wherever that Jokic news came out. There's a scenario here where Butler goes out and scores 20, 22 fantasy points. And if the news doesn't break the way you and I think it does later, then we might look back and be like, shit, we should have had some Butler in our lineups. But if we end up getting these guys ruled out, like it's not like the 20 to 22 fantasy points or whatever from Jared Butler, if you don't have it, is going to kill you. But you would probably regret not having it if that news didn't break. But I'd rather bet on the news breaking.
I'm with you. And that's where I think the big decision point when you're using the Sims right now, we have to talk through that process because it's 16 minutes before a lock. And that's just one piece that with the slate, looking at it the way that it is, like from an outside in perspective, looking purely at projection and ownership relative to each other, relative to optimal percentage, you're going to want to get away from that piece because we're looking more from the inside out and seeing what could exist coming up later. And you just got to get away from like a 3K piece who, again, if he put up 25 and you told me I had to have 0 or 100% of it, I would want 0 of it. I would want absolutely 0 of 25, which is like a 65th percentile outcome for him. So it's definitely a piece that went from being like Hulk slam jam to like 0.
Yeah, I'll rerun everything right now. I don't think I'm going to get to a massive amount of Jared Butler in the Sims, but it will be some. And then he's somebody I'm going to be doing a negative ROI boost to. That's what I think is going to end up happening here. That's what I think. Yep. And then on the flip side, because you had brought this up as well about what we want to do with the tools on the site. And then I know we've got a handful of questions that have been coming in for us. So we'll address those as well. But I think with people building lineups and ownership and projections updated, I'd rather talk about this now than wait 10 minutes where it's not going to be actionable for people. Who are the players you want to be boosting in the Sims to create more flexibility in lineups?
I'm jamming Russell Westbrook. I'm jamming Michael Porter Jr. I'm jamming Peyton Watson. I'm jamming, it appears 4 or 5 of these Denver guys. I mean, I'm just jamming every single one of them here. And then I'm like getting a little bit of trace amounts of everybody there. But, it's basically, there's not a lineup spot that I won't have available to me. I guess the only issue would be, what I do at center. But I'm just going to be playing so much Anthony Davis. I already was. I think he'll be more popular now because the people who were going up to Jokic, like, we have to spend money on raw points. And he was the highest raw scorer by like 10 fantasy points. Now it's AD. Like, AD is that guy today. So we'll see where that ownership lands by lock of it. But I feel pretty confident in just kind of jamming everybody on the Denver side.
Yep. I am feeling the same way. I'll do ROI boost to all those guys after building out my next set of lineups, which should be the last one that I go through. Yep, and then we've still got a bunch of other guys who are questionable for the slate. All the more reason for you guys to join Josh and I over in playback when the slate starts in 14 minutes, because Jokic is now questionable. DeJounte Murray is still questionable. Lauri Markkinen's questionable. Tyler Hero's questionable. And Bryce Sensabaugh also still questionable. Super chat here from Connor wants to know, who are the DK cash game locks? Considering the information we have now, Eric, who are the players who people should absolutely be playing in cash games on DK?
Oh, what a fun cash game day. You're absolutely playing. So I will say this. I wouldn't overreact to the news so much that I wouldn't play Amin Thompson and Najee Marshall in cash right now. If something changes with the news where you just have to pivot everything later and deal with it then, sounds great. But like, Colin Sexton, you're playing in cash right now. I wouldn't play Derek Lively. That's the one guy who's really, really popular that I don't think you would need to have in cash at the center position. There's so much value coming up later now that I would be backloading it a little bit. And the other one I really don't like for cash is Naz Reid. Like, Naz Reid, I'm very against. It's very push and pull. You watch my Timberwolves play. I've watched too much of their terrible brand of basketball this season to know that it's either a Naz Reid day or it's a Julius Randle day. It's one of the 2 days, it feels like, every single time. And I just kind of get away from playing the popular one. I play the lower owned one. Like, I'm going to have some Julius Randle, whether I want to or not. It is what it is. But we have a popular Naz Reid and Anthony Edwards. That's just kind of reacting to yesterday's box score, the last couple box scores. I'm going to play a little bit of Julius Randle. I'm going to be below on both of those two.
Okay. Yeah. So for cash games, must play Colin Sexton, must play Najee Marshall. Just because he's going to be so popular, I'm still going to say play Amin Thompson in cash. It's just hard to say get away from somebody who's probably going to be 70% owned in cash games, even if better options might open up later. So play him, even though to me, I want some exposure to Thompson and GPPs as well. But cash games, I think he's a must play sort of guy. I'm assuming you're updating your lineups in the same way as me, Eric. What are you going? And I know we already said that Thompson's somebody we want to have exposure to. But what are you going to do with him relative to his ownership? Because we have all this news we're waiting on for later, and he's projected to be 50% owned. Do you expect yourself to be overweight to him, about with the field, or underweight, considering that we are going to want to be making swaps?
Yeah, I'm going to be under. It's uncomfortable, but like, I just did my Russell Westbrook projection. I haven't projected better than Amin Thompson without Nikola Jokic on the floor tonight against Boston. Like, Amin Thompson is going to be 49% owned. Russell Westbrook's going to be like, I'll still give everybody enough credit where Russell Westbrook still gets to like 20% or 15%, but we're still talking about like for all intents and purposes, like an equal projection and a very unequal ownership. And that is called leverage. And that's kind of what I'm trying to create. And so I'm going to go to some Amin Thompson. I'm just not going to play 50% of him. I think he's a really good piece to have in your lineups. I think he's still somebody who's very, very viable and the best projected point per dollar play of the early window. But I also think that what's coming up later could be way, way, way lower owned, and I'm willing to find out.
Let's see what we have for questions here. We've got Ben P wants to know, how can he preload some Sarge in the Sims? Let's see. What do we have for Sarge? Yeah, so you have to do a mass amount of up boosts. One other thing that you could potentially do as well, if there's a cheap guy who projects better than Sarge right now at center, which I'm not sure all of the cheap ones right now, but because he's projected to basically not play today at the moment, because that's been the scenario for him. If Jokic is in, he hasn't been in the rotation. And then earlier in the year, when Jokic missed a few games, Sarge was the one who started. Now, we don't know that Sarge is going to start. That's just kind of my best estimation in this scenario. If there's another cheap center that projects better in the Sims, you could give them a bunch of up boosts. Then you could global swap that player to Sarge and it'll be in some lineups. But overall right now, I think the best way to go about approaching the Denver guys is just to give ROI boosts to a bunch of them. And also do it to like Terry Rozier and Jaime Jaquez Jr. and some of the other players.
Julian Strother is 3,200 shooting guard small forward. That's like a real thing right there. That's like a tournament winner, 100K. Thank you for coming. Have a nice day kind of play right there.
Could be.
Oh, this is so weird. Whatever.
I am uploading some lineups right now.
How nice for you. How nice for you. I'm nowhere near that.
It's all going to change. My priority right now is just get some exposure to the guys I want to the early games, have lineups that are backloaded for swaps. This is like a fake final version of lineups.
Yeah. This is just wild.
All right. Next question here. It is from DC24 on DK. We're getting to more Porzingis with the news. So Porzingis is somebody who, I'll have exposure to Kristaps Porzingis, but not as any kind of priority. All the Boston guys look a little bit better in the absence of Derek White. The one that is clearly the priority for me, though, is Drew Holiday. For you, Porzingis, Eric?
Yeah, I love Porzingis for tournaments.
Let's see what we have here. Rabashua wants to know, play the if-then. Okay, we kind of did this already, asking about Hero and White. Larson 407 wants to know, can we talk through the Jazz, since we won't know until lock what the starting lineup looks like? Thoughts on Isaiah Collier? So the overall player that I currently like the most from the Utah Jazz is Walker Kessler. I think that he is somebody who already looks good that could also benefit from the absence of Lauri Markkanen. For yourself, Eric, the Utah Jazz?
Who's a priority?
Just how we're approaching the team in general, who's a priority, who we like, and how we're potentially positioning ourselves in the event that Markkanen doesn't play.
Yeah, I'm not going to overreact to Juzang or Svi Mikhailuk. I think those are the two main guys that you need to be paying attention to if Markkanen and Sensabaugh sit. You might have a little bit of them show up. The main guy for me is if Micah Potter gets another start. He didn't play very well against Orlando, 21 minutes, but he has a flat 3K. And so I boosted Micah Potter earlier in the day to make sure that I got to a little bit. Now I don't even really have to try because that's just being absorbed by Julian Strother, and I will deal with it then.
The next question that we have here, it is from Sniffs1234. He wants to know, what do we do with Jose Alvarado if DeJounte Murray is out? I'd be interested to see the starting lineup there. Don't forget Zion Williamson's also questionable. So there's multiple pieces that we have to see play out there. If we find out that Alvarado is starting and not restricted, he's clearly a great option as well. Alvarado's been back for a few games now. Keep in mind earlier in the year, though, that I believe when DeJounte Murray was out, there was an expectation that Alvarado was going to start, and he didn't. And there was a bunch of other guys that were ahead of him in the rotation. So if Alvarado starts, he looks good. But if he comes off the bench, he'd be harder for me to get to on this slate. What do you make if DeJounte Murray sits?
I mean, play CJ McCollum, play Yeah, I mean, it's so hard with Zion back. Like, I feel better not having to worry about getting to too much if DeJounte's out, unless Jose Alvarado just ends up being completely unowned by the human race. Then I'll play a little bit. He's 5,300. It seems like an overpay, but played 20 minutes his first game back. Only played 12 the next one, but they didn't really need to have him out there. He's not going to be out there a lot with McCollum and with DeJounte Murray active there, but I'll probably just kind of react to it in the moment. It should be if I had to guess. But Brandon Boston, 3,500 is the most appealing guy that most of the field gets to. I probably won't at 3,500 for him purely because I like what's coming up later more.
That's how I feel as well. And then we've also got a question here from Active Guru, favorite high-owned players and low-owned players at each position on DK. So low-owned players, it's just getting to some of the Denver guys and then guys like Terry Rozier and Tommy Hawkins Jr., but then other than that, yeah, Michael Porter Jr., Russell Westbrook, Jamal Murray. So there are a lot of low-owned players I like just in the anticipation of news. Who else do you like that's low-owned, Eric? And then are there any chalk pieces that you like for the slate?
Low-owned pieces. So right now, Russell Westbrook, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Julian Strother, Peyton Watson. Anybody wearing a Denver Nuggets jersey is like my favorite guy to kind of be targeting right now. I'll put them all in the wash and see exactly who ends up who. Right now, it's just a smattering of all of them and making sure I get like 20%, 25% Amin Thompson, kind of carving out little spots here in the early window. Kyle Kuzma a little bit here as well. Chalk pieces I like for this, like Colin Sexton, I think is just fine. I'm not a huge fan of Naz Reid chalk, so I've talked about that one. And Trae Young, also, I think pretty darn good chalk at 9,700. So Trae Young, Colin Sexton, and then on the cheap end, Julian Strother. Those are my three favorite like tournament ranges of popular and not popular blend.
How you doing on your lineups?
Just terrible. Don't mind me.
Okay. Yeah, I'm it's just tinkering around with some of the ROI boosts and making sure I don't have too much early exposure is what I'm doing.
That's exactly what I'm doing too. I'm just kind of going through team by team, making sure that there isn't anything that I'm way off base with. You know, I want to get to a little bit of Kaishan George still. Like I don't want to be completely off of him. Like I don't want to give up some of like the sub 4K shots on guys like Jared Butler. Talked about it getting to like none of him. I ended up getting to like 8%. I'm just fine getting to like little smatterings of guys. 7% LaMelo Ball showing up for me. I'm fine with that too. I just don't want to be playing anybody crazy, chalky whatsoever in the early window. Like in a
I did dial back Amin Thompson, which definitely a little bit uncomfortable with, but I have 23% of Thompson right now. So that's something that just kind of opportunity cost of trying to reserve spots. Maybe I'll go a little bit higher on Thompson now.
I'm okay with that, honestly. Like it's uncomfortable, man. It really sucks. And he's the kind of guy who can put up 45, 50 and make you feel like, oh, I just missed out on like a really good mid-range guy. And that's kind of what you're aiming for Russell Westbrook to go out and do at the moment. So it's like, it's a push and pull effect of your lineups. I think the harder decision for me is honestly going to be Najee Marshall. 4,600 Najee Marshall. I really struggle figuring out what I want to do with him.
Well, we just don't have to figure that out right now. He doesn't lock.
Oh, I know.
33.
I know, but I'm saying that'll be the next decision that you guys will cover on playback, and that one really makes me nauseous.
Yeah, that's one for me that I don't feel like I really have to do it now. I left Kuzma 20%, Butler right around 10% for him on me. Another guy who had to do a negative ROI boost too, because he was showing up a lot, was Jalen Green.
Yep, Jalen Green. I put Jalen Green. I put an exposure cap on him. I just put in 10%, and I'm not going to get to any more of him. Okay. Actually, I'm going to move that to 8. I don't want any more than that. Şengün, I got to 5% of. That's great. That makes me so happy when it just comes out the way I want it to. And what's that idiot's name? Kaishan George. There we go. I wanted to get a cap on him too. This is so much
was George
insanity.
Showing up in lineups for me?
Yes, he definitely was.
Not too much George, problematic.
Okay. What was the name of that point guard one more time? The really chalky.
Butler?
Thank you. Just doing this.
Was there any further super chats that came in? No. Let's go ahead and look at final questions from Discord. We've got Jason 123, best value plays in one spend up for 20 lineups. So best value play across 20 lineups. Cheap guy I have the most of right now is Najee Marshall. still TBD, depending on what that Mavs starting lineup is, as well as what ends up happening with any other news that ends up breaking. Other cheap options, I am getting to a good amount of Peyton Watson right now. Super cheap. Nobody else like super cheap though. And then overall favorite pay up for me, it is Trae Young. I'll let you work on your lineups, Eric. I can handle this. Next question, M Grizzly. What is my highest exposure to the first 2 games? It is 25% of Amen Thompson. That's the player I have the most of. And then Mike 1377 wants to know lotion play of the night. I'll stick with Trae Young. Trae Young's the pay up option who I currently have the most interest in, and I don't think that's going to change for me as a pay up.
I got all my lineups in, man. That was insanity. I hope this show helps you guys kind of like, we ran into news at like different times, and sometimes I say it, sometimes I don't. It's like the timing of the news can be as important as the news itself. Like, we're not the only people react to Dan, but that lineup is going to come out and it's going to look different. I don't know what it's going to look like. I think Dario Saric starting at the 5 makes the most sense, but we are going to get something very, very interesting late. And I never want to just like focus in on the results. Look at the post-contest sim, something that Greg talks about all the time, where it's just like the most underutilized thing you can look at here at our site. Look at it after the fact, and you tell me the early pieces relative to the late pieces. It's going to be hugely distorted. Best of luck. If Jokic plays, I will never probably come on this show again. So something for you to cheer for.
All right, guys, come join Josh and I and Playback. It's going to be an interesting slate. We're going to have players ruled out over the course of the next hour or so. We're going to have weird starting lineups. This is going to be a very important late swap slate. So come join Josh and I in Playback. Good luck with your lineups tonight. See you guys over in Playback. Jordan's dropping that link in there, so if you guys are looking for it right there on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. See you in Playback.